Every time you win publicly, you lose strategically. Every time you celebrate a victory, you create 10 new enemies. Every time you announce your success, you paint a target on your back. And the worst part, you think you're supposed to do this. You think sharing your wins is confidence. You think celebrating your achievements is healthy. You think letting people know you're winning is part of success. But Sun Tzu, the greatest military strategist in history, understood something that will completely change how you think about victory. He said the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And what nobody tells you is that the supreme art of life is to win without anyone knowing you won. Because the moment people know you're winning, you've already started losing. If you're ready to understand how real power operates in silence, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We reveal the strategies that the truly powerful use but never talk about. Let's begin. Every time you win publicly, you lose strategically. Every time you celebrate a victory, you create 10 new enemies. Every time you announce your success, you paint a target on your back. And the worst part, you think you're supposed to do this. You think sharing your wins is confidence. You think celebrating your achievements is healthy. You think letting people know you're winning is part of success. But Sun Tzu, the greatest military strategist in history, understood something that will completely change how you think about victory. He said the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And what nobody tells you is that the supreme art of life is to win without anyone knowing you won. Because the moment people know you're winning, you've already started losing. CTA. If you're ready to understand how real power operates in silence, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We reveal the strategies that the truly powerful use but never talk about. Let's begin. Script principle. Let me start with a story that will make this concept crystal clear. In ancient China, there were two generals, both brilliant, both successful, both won countless battles. General A won his battles through superior tactics, overwhelming force, and decisive victory. Every time he won, the emperor heard about it. The court celebrated. The people cheered. His name became legendary. He was honored, respected, feared. General B also won his battles, but nobody talked about his victories. In fact, most people didn't even know there had been a battle. His enemies would simply withdraw. Conflicts would dissolve. Problems would disappear. No dramatic battles. No celebrations. No glory. Just quiet resolution. Now, here is the question Sun Tzu asked. Which general was truly superior? And his answer shocked everyone. General B, the one nobody celebrated, the one who won without visible victory. Because General A, despite all his success, created a problem with every victory. He created enemies who studied his tactics, rivals who wanted to prove themselves against the famous general, ambitious subordinates who wanted his position, political opponents who envied his glory. Every public victory made him more vulnerable, more of a target, more likely to eventually lose everything. General B faced none of these problems. He won, but invisibly. And because nobody knew he was winning, nobody was motivated to bring him down. This is the essence of what Sun Tzu meant by supreme excellence. Not winning gloriously, but winning invisibly. And most people today are doing the exact opposite. Think about modern life, social media, career, relationships, business. What do people do when they win? They announce it. They post it. They celebrate it publicly. They make sure everyone knows they're succeeding. New job, LinkedIn post, lost weight, Instagram transformation, made money. Subtle flex in every conversation. Successful relationship. Couple photos everywhere. Achievement unlocked. Tell everyone. And we're taught this is healthy. We're taught this is confidence. We're taught this is celebrating your wins and owning your success. But Sun Tzu would look at this behavior and tell you you're committing strategic suicide. Because every time you announce a victory, you're triggering something in other people. Something primitive. Something dangerous. Envy. The moment people know you're winning, a switch flips in their psychology. They start comparing themselves to you, and in that comparison, they feel diminished. And when people feel diminished by your success, they unconsciously or consciously want to see you fail. They want to bring you back down to their level. They want to find flaws in your success. They want to prove that your victory isn't real, or isn't deserved, or won't last. And even if they're your friends, even if they consciously want to support you, there is a part of them that will be activated against you. This isn't cynicism, this is human nature. And Sun Tzu understood human nature better than almost anyone in history. He wrote, "When you are strong, appear weak. When you are winning, appear to be struggling. When you have advantage, hide it." Why? Because the moment you reveal your strength, you give your enemies information. You give them something to study, something to plan against, something to undermine, but more than that, you give them motivation. The visible winner becomes the target, everyone wants to take down. Think about it. In nature, the lion that roars the loudest, that displays the most, that makes itself most visible, is the first one other lions will challenge. The king of the jungle doesn't stay king by announcing his dominance constantly. He stays king by being so quietly powerful that challenging him seems pointless. This is invisible victory, and it is everywhere once you know what to look for. The wealthiest families in the world aren't the ones you know about. The Rothschilds, the Medicis historically, the truly wealthy operate so quietly that most people don't even know their names. Why? Because announcing wealth makes you a target for criminals, for lawsuits, for government attention, for envious relatives, for kidnappers, for everyone who wants a piece. The smart wealthy appear moderately successful or even struggling. They drive normal cars, live in normal houses, dress normally, and they do this not because they're humble, but because they're strategic. They understand that visible wealth attracts problems. Invisible wealth attracts nothing but opportunity. The same principle applies to relationships. The couples who post everything on social media, who constantly display their happiness, who make their relationship their entire public identity, what happens to them? They either break up publicly and humiliatingly, or they feel trapped in maintaining the image. They've made their relationship a performance, and performances are exhausting. But the couples who keep their relationship private, who don't announce every milestone, who don't perform happiness for an audience, they have something real, because it is not contaminated by external validation and observation. There is no pressure to maintain an image, no vulnerability to public opinion, no invitation for others to comment on or judge their relationship. This is invisible victory in intimacy, and it is stronger than public display could ever be. Sun Tzu would tell you that the moment you make your victories public, you change them. They're no longer about the actual achievement. They're about the performance of achievement. They're about how others perceive you, and that dependency on external perception is a weakness, a vulnerability that others can exploit. Let me tell you about one of the most successful people I ever met. You've never heard of him. That is the point. He built and sold 3 companies, each for tens of millions of dollars. He is financially set for generations. He drives a 10-year-old Toyota, lives in a normal suburban house, wears clothes from Target, and when people ask what he does, he says he is a consultant. Nobody knows he is wealthy. Nobody knows he is successful. Nobody envies him. Nobody tries to sue him. Nobody asks him for money. Nobody treats him differently. He moves through the world with zero friction, zero target on his back, zero enemies created by visible success. Meanwhile, I know people who made a fraction of what he made, posted about it constantly, and now deal with endless problems. Former friends asking for loans, family members expecting support, strangers DMing investment opportunities, the IRS paying extra attention, partners and vendors trying to extract more money because they know you have it. Criminals literally using social media to select targets. This person made themselves vulnerable through visible victory, and they wonder why life got harder after they succeeded. Sun Tzu understood something about warfare that applies perfectly to life. The enemy you see is less dangerous than the enemy you create. When you win publicly, you create enemies. People who weren't thinking about you suddenly are. People who weren't competing with you suddenly want to. People who didn't care about your success suddenly feel threatened by it. And these aren't necessarily bad people. They're not villains. They're just humans responding to human psychology. We are comparative creatures. We determine our worth by comparing ourselves to others. And when someone in our circle wins visibly, it forces a comparison that often makes us feel worse about ourselves. And when we feel worse, we want to restore our sense of worth. And one way to do that is to diminish the other person's success, to find flaws, to critique, to undermine, to wait for them to fail so we can feel better. This is why tall poppy syndrome exists. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. The poppy that grows tallest gets cut first. Societies unconsciously punish visible success, and individuals consciously and unconsciously do the same. You're not paranoid for recognizing this. You're strategic. You're understanding the game that Sun Tzu mastered 2,500 years ago. But here is where it gets really sophisticated. Sun Tzu didn't just say win invisibly. He said make the enemy think they're winning while you're actually winning. This is next level. It is not enough to hide your victories. You actively create the impression that you're struggling, that you're barely hanging on, that you're not a threat. Why? Because the moment people think you're not a threat, they stop watching you. They stop competing with you. They stop trying to undermine you. They focus on other targets, other threats, and you're free to operate without resistance. This is why successful people often pour sour mouth. They complain about how hard things are, how expensive everything is, how much they're struggling, even when they're doing great, and people think they're being modest or relatable, but what they're actually doing is strategic invisibility. They're removing themselves as a target by appearing to be in the same boat as everyone else. This protects them, disarms envy, reduces competition, creates space to actually succeed without interference. Let me give you a modern example. There are successful content creators, authors, consultants who make millions per year, and they never talk about it. When people ask how they're doing, they say it is okay, steady. You know how it is. They don't show wealth, they don't flex success. They actively downplay their achievements. And as a result, nobody targets them. Nobody tries to expose them. Nobody writes hit pieces. Nobody gets jealous enough to sabotage. They're not on anyone's radar as a threat. Meanwhile, other creators with a fraction of their success post constantly about their wins, and they get endless hate, endless criticism, endless people trying to tear them down. Why? Because they made themselves visible targets. They triggered envy. They created enemies out of people who would have ignored them if they'd stayed quiet. This is the cost of visible victory, and most people don't realize they're paying it until it is too late, until the backlash comes, until the tall poppy gets cut, until the nail gets hammered. And then they wonder what they did wrong. What they did wrong was win publicly. Now, let's talk about why this is so hard for people. Why, even understanding all of this, most people will still announce their victories. And the answer is ego. The human ego needs validation. It needs recognition. It needs others to see and acknowledge its achievements. This is hardwired into us from childhood. We do something good. We want mom and dad to see. We get an A. We want the teacher to notice. We win the game. We want the crowd to cheer. Our entire early life teaches us that achievement requires external validation. That success isn't real unless others acknowledge it. And we carry this into adulthood. We carry this into our entire lives. The need to be seen winning. The need to have our success validated by others. But this need is a weakness, a vulnerability, a leash that others can pull. Because the moment you need external validation for your success, you've given others power over your sense of accomplishment. You've made your victory dependent on their acknowledgement. And Sun Tzu would tell you that any dependency is a strategic vulnerability. The person who needs to announce their victories is not truly powerful. They're dependent on the audience. The person who can win without announcement, who can succeed without external validation, who can achieve and be satisfied purely from the achievement itself, that person is truly powerful. Because they're not dependent on anything outside themselves, they're strategically invulnerable. And this is where Stoicism and Sun Tzu's strategy overlap perfectly. The Stoics taught that external validation is outside your control, therefore you shouldn't depend on it. Sun Tzu taught that depending on anything outside your control makes you vulnerable. Both philosophies arrive at the same conclusion through different paths. The moment you announce your victory seeking validation, you've made yourself dependent on others' reactions, and you've made yourself vulnerable to their envy. This is why Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in the world as Roman emperor, wrote in his private journal, not for publication, that he should practice not needing recognition, that he should do what is right and good without needing others to see and applaud. He understood that the need for visible victory was a weakness, that true strength is doing what must be done and being satisfied with having done it, regardless of whether anyone knows. This is invisible victory, and it is the marker of genuine power versus performed power. Let me tell you what happens when you start practicing invisible victory. First, your life becomes significantly easier. Friction disappears, conflicts reduce, envy-based problems vanish, because you're not triggering people's comparative psychology. You're not making them feel diminished. You're not activating their competitive instincts. You move through the world without creating resistance. Second, you become more effective because you're not spending energy on performance, on crafting the perfect announcement, on managing others' perceptions, on defending your success from critics. All that energy goes into actual achievement, into real work, into genuine progress. Third, you become more free because you're not trapped by the image you've created. You're not obligated to maintain a public persona. You're not worried about being exposed or losing status. You just exist and operate and achieve without the weight of public expectation. This is what Sun Tzu called effortless victory, not because winning is easy, but because there is no resistance, no friction, no enemies, just pure strategic action producing results, and nobody interfering because nobody's paying attention. But the deepest reason to practice invisible victory is this: it changes what you're actually pursuing. Most people pursue success to be seen as successful, to have status, to be respected, to be envied. Their entire motivation is external. They want the achievement not for itself, but for what it signals to others. This is a trap because it means you're never satisfied. There is always someone who hasn't acknowledged your success yet. There is always a bigger audience to impress. There is always more validation to seek. You're on a hedonic treadmill of external approval that never ends. But when you practice invisible victory, when you achieve without announcing, when you succeed without seeking validation, you discover what you actually care about because you have to. You have to find satisfaction in the achievement itself, in the work itself, in the process itself, because there is no external reward, no applause, no recognition, just you and the thing you accomplished. And either that is enough or it is not. And if it is not, you realize you were pursuing the wrong things. You were chasing validation, not achievement. You were seeking status, not growth. You were performing for an audience, not building a life. This is the gift of invisible victory. It reveals your true motivations, and it forces you to cultivate internal satisfaction, which is the only satisfaction that lasts, which is the only satisfaction that can't be taken from you, which is the only satisfaction that makes you truly powerful. Now, let's address the obvious objection. What about networking? What about opportunities that come from people knowing you're successful? What about deals that only happen because of reputation? And this is a legitimate question, and the answer is nuance. Sun Tzu isn't saying never let anyone know anything about your success. He is saying be strategic about who knows what. There is a massive difference between posting your wins to thousands of strangers on social media versus quietly letting relevant people in your field know you're capable. There is a difference between performing success for an audience versus demonstrating competence to potential partners. The key is selectivity and privacy. You can let specific people who matter know specific things that are relevant without broadcasting to everyone. You can build a reputation in your industry without being publicly visible. Some of the most successful people in every field are well known within their niche, but completely unknown to the general public. They have the benefits of reputation without the costs of visibility. This is strategic visibility, not hiding completely, but being surgical about what you reveal and to whom. Sun Tzu's principle still applies. Reveal strength to those who need to know for specific strategic reasons. Hide it from everyone else, because everyone else doesn't need to know, and them knowing only creates risk without benefit. Let me give you a framework for thinking about this. Before announcing any achievement, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Who benefits from knowing this? If the answer is only your ego, don't announce it. If the answer includes specific people who can create opportunities for you, tell those specific people privately. 2. What are the risks of this being public? Are you creating envy, making yourself a target, inviting criticism, setting yourself up for schadenfreude when things eventually go wrong? If the risks outweigh the benefits, stay silent. 3. What is your actual motivation? Are you seeking validation, trying to prove something to someone, performing for an audience? Or are you genuinely trying to create value by sharing information? Be brutally honest. Because if your motivation is ego or insecurity, the announcement will create more problems than benefits. This framework filters out 90% of the impulses people have to announce their wins, and that filtering protects you. It keeps you strategically invisible. It keeps you safe from the costs of visible victory. Now, let's talk about the ultimate level of this strategy. Sun Tzu said the greatest victory is the battle that was never fought, the conflict that was resolved before it began, the war that was won without anyone knowing there was a war. This is what he meant by subduing the enemy without fighting. And in modern life, this means solving problems, achieving goals, and winning competitions so smoothly that nobody realizes you are competing. Think about business. The companies that truly dominate don't announce every strategic move. They don't tell competitors what they're doing. They just do it. And by the time anyone realizes what happened, it is too late. Amazon didn't announce they were going to dominate retail. They just slowly, quietly built infrastructure until they were unbeatable. Apple didn't announce they were going to reinvent phones. They just showed up with the iPhone. The greatest competitive victories happen when your opponent doesn't realize they're being outmaneuvered until it is over. This requires patience, discipline, the ability to resist the urge to gloat or preview your success. But the reward is total strategic dominance, because your enemies can't defend against what they don't see coming. And in personal life, this means achieving your goals so quietly that people only notice you've changed after it has already happened. Losing weight without announcing you're on a diet, getting skilled without announcing you're practicing, building wealth without announcing you're saving and investing, improving relationships without posting about date nights. All of this happens under the radar, and then one day people notice. But by then, then the change is permanent. It is not a performance. It is not vulnerable to their opinions or reactions. It is just reality. This is invisible victory, and it is so much more powerful than the alternative, than announcing your intention to change and then struggling publicly with every setback, than making your goals a performance that others can judge and comment on, than seeking validation for every small win along the way. All of that makes you weaker, makes your goals harder to achieve. Invisible victory makes everything easier because there is no resistance. No one's watching for you to fail. No one's criticizing your methods. No one's comparing your progress to their expectations. You're free to actually do the work, and the work is what matters, not the performance of doing the work. Let me tell you what the truly powerful understand that most people never learn. Power is inversely correlated with visibility. The more visible you are, the less powerful you actually are, because visibility means scrutiny, means accountability, means others tracking your moves and planning counters, means constant performance, means vulnerability to public opinion. The people with real power, structural power, lasting power, are the ones you don't know about. The advisors behind politicians, the investors behind companies, the strategists behind campaigns, the ones making decisions without taking credit, the ones shaping outcomes without being visible. They understand what Sun Tzu taught, that the hand that moves the pieces is more powerful than the pieces themselves, and the pieces are visible, the hand is not. In your life, you can choose to be a piece or a hand. A piece is visible, praised, celebrated, and ultimately movable by others. A hand is invisible, uncelebrated, and autonomous. Which would you rather be? Most people choose peace because they need the validation, the recognition, the visible success, but that choice costs them their power. The wise choose to be the hand, to move invisibly, to win without credit, to achieve without announcement, and in doing so, they gain something far more valuable than recognition. They gain freedom, agency, strategic invulnerability, and lasting success. Now here is the paradox that makes this truly brilliant. When you stop seeking visible victory, when you stop announcing your wins, when you stop performing success for an audience, something unexpected happens. People respect you more, not because they see your success, but because they sense something about you that is different. There is a quiet confidence to people who don't need validation, a solidity, a groundedness. They're not trying to prove anything, they're not performing, they're not seeking approval, and that very quality makes them more impressive than people who are constantly announcing their achievements. Because announcement reveals insecurity, it reveals need. It reveals dependency on external validation. The person who needs to tell you they're successful is actually broadcasting that they're not confident in their success. They need you to confirm it, to validate it, to acknowledge it. But the person who never mentions their success, who downplays when asked, who seems genuinely uninterested in impressing you, that person is actually impressive because their confidence is internal. It doesn't need your recognition. And that independence is what true power looks like. So the invisible victory strategy doesn't actually cost you respect or reputation. It enhances it, just not in the way most people expect. Sun Tzu wrote about something he called the formless strategy, the idea that the ultimate strategic position is one that can't be read, can't be predicted, can't be countered, and visibility is form. Every time you announce something, you give your strategy form, shape, predictability. You reveal patterns, preferences, methods, and anyone studying you can use that information against you. But invisibility is formlessness. Nobody knows what you're doing, what you're planning, what you've achieved, what you're capable of. They can't prepare for what they can't see. They can't counter what they don't know exists. You become unpredictable, unknowable, and in any competitive environment, unpredictability is a massive advantage because preparation requires prediction, and prediction requires information. And if you don't give them information, they can't prepare for you. This is why the most dangerous competitors are the ones nobody's watching, the ones who seem unimpressive, who appear to be struggling, who don't announce their progress, and then suddenly, they're dominant, and everyone wonders where they came from. They didn't come from anywhere. They were always there, working quietly, improving invisibly, and nobody noticed until it was too late. Let me give you the ultimate test of whether you've internalized this principle. Imagine you achieve something significant, something you've worked toward for years, something that represents real success. Now imagine you can never tell anyone. You can never post about it, never mention it in conversation, never have anyone acknowledge or validate it. It just sits there as a private achievement. How does that feel? If that feels unbearable, if you can't imagine success that isn't validated externally, you're still trapped in the need for visible victory. Your ego is still dependent on others, but if that feels fine, If you can imagine being satisfied with the achievement itself, regardless of recognition, you're approaching true power because you've separated your sense of accomplishment from others' awareness of it, and that separation is freedom. That is what Sun Tzu was pointing at. Not just tactical advantage, not just strategic protection, but psychological freedom, the ability to achieve, to succeed, to win, and to be satisfied with that purely for its own sake, without needing the world to know, without needing validation, without needing recognition, just the pure satisfaction of having done something difficult and done it well. That is invisible victory, and it is available to you right now. You just have to choose it. You have to choose to stop performing, stop announcing, stop seeking validation for your achievements, and start finding satisfaction in the achievements themselves, in the work, in the process, in the quiet knowledge that you're winning even though nobody's watching. And here is what happens when you make this choice. You'll notice that the people who matter, the people with real power and real success themselves, they'll notice you anyway. Not because you announced anything, but because quality recognizes quality, power recognizes power, success recognizes success. You don't need to broadcast it. The right people will sense it. They'll see it in how you carry yourself, how you think, how you operate, and they'll be drawn to you precisely because you're not performing, because you're real, because you're not needy. And those connections, forged without performance, without announcement, without visible victory, those are the connections that actually matter. Those are the relationships that create real opportunities, real partnerships, real success. Meanwhile, all the people you would have attracted with public announcements of success, those are people attracted to status, to appearance, to performance, and those relationships are shallow, transactional, temporary. They'll leave the moment your visible success wanes. But the relationships formed through genuine competence, recognized quietly, those last because they're based on reality, not performance.